Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 63 of season 3 of Brody Sports Talk. My name is Sean Morgan. I am joined by Caleb Walgren. Once again, fortunately, we are without Derek Rusnick today, but it is Fantasy Friday, where we are going to talk nothing but fantasy football and, all the things that come with it. We've got a pretty decent episode, I think. I'm going to recap some of what happened in our respective leagues as we have so far this season. We are going to talk about our Week 2 fantasy studs and duds, including, who was a surprise performance, whether it's a good or bad performance. We've got a couple matchup questions that we fielded on Twitter. And then finally, we'll talk about who our fantasy sleepers are heading into the week. So let's talk about our leagues, man. Let's talk about our leagues. Once again, we both survived in our Guillotine League. If you guys aren't familiar with the Guillotine League, I don't think we ever explained it. Maybe we did. I think we did
in the opener, but basically with the Guillotine League, lowest score gets sent home every week. It is an 18-team league, and so we have hence chopped 2 teams. This week, unfortunately, it was one of our friends and co-hosts from Clutch Crew Sports, as they had Zach Wilson and Mac Jones, and there was just not a lot of passing happening in that game, and his team got the axe this week, which means that people are bidding for people like Stephon Diggs and Darrell Henderson because, that's who you want.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. The past week, whoever got eliminated, I can't remember what team it was. I did end up with CeeDee Lamb, which was a very, very nice help. Because I definitely went wide receiver light with my draft and really prioritized. I mean, my first 2 off the board were Lamar Jackson and Tom Brady. I had a really good week 2. Really good week 2 in the Guillotine. I think I don't actually know if I had the highest score. I was close. I think it's who had. Let me look here.
You're the highest.
I am the highest score. I've figured whoever had Henry may have, but I mean, in Superflex, man, getting 2 stud, quarterbacks really does make a difference. And my goal with this Guillotine League was to go and get 2 quarterbacks that I thought were going to be able to carry me through the season and shore up points in areas that I could potentially go a little bit lighter on. So far, through 2 weeks, it's worked out. We will see, with the additional teams being eliminated, I would hope I'm also safe for week 3, and then I can potentially look at what may come as far as fixing a couple of other spots of weaknesses before I can maybe pump the brakes on picking up free agents. Well, let's talk about my Dynasty League. I need to, and I know I have a couple of people now that are in my Dynasty League that are listening to the podcast. Specifically, I think actually listening to these episodes. So I am going to gloat because I have every right to gloat. So I did win my matchup this week. 215 points even to, actually, no, hang on. That's the wrong league. 212.54 to 125.02. So I ended up beating the average score by 60%. It was a monstrous week. The next closest high score to me was at 162, and that was off the back of Derrick Henry. I really have a win now team. Brady had a big game. I do have Christian McCaffrey. I do have Aaron Jones. They had great games. I made good decisions at the wideout spot. I'm going to give myself props. Who was my fantasy sleeper last week? It was Courtland Sutton. What did Courtland Sutton go and do? Caught 9 passes on 12 targets for 159 yards. It gave me almost 25 points. The only mistake I think I made is going to be having Keenan Allen. And even though he, caught 4 balls, 108 yards, he ended up finishing at around 14 points. And I ended up keeping Sterling Shepard on the bench once again, who came out and slotted, 17 and a half on the bench. But why am I complaining? I had the Bills defense as well, 24 points.
Yeah.
Like it was a good week. It was a very good week. Entering into week 3, things are going to be a little bit rougher because my quarterback options, I don't have as many advantageous matchups as before. Brady's going up against the Rams. Aaron Rodgers, my other option, going up against the 49ers. My other quarterback option is technically Trey Lance, who's going to remain in the taxi spot. So not as easy of a decision, I think, in regards to, do I go with the Brady to Evans combination, or do I look for, some potential options in, is Rodgers going to have a better game? And, Sterling Shepard, the Giants are going up against the Falcons defense. So maybe I go and shift some things around. A lot of questions. Going to try to answer them over the next couple of days.
So next up in the podcast league that I'm in, that I did get Sean and Derek in as co-owners. So they are officially losing with me at this point.
We are suffering alongside.
We played Scotch N Sports this past week, and I'm going to do my best version of one of their segments right now. So what's souring my Scotch is that I went ahead and picked up Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, thinking that would be a great combo for fantasy football. Allen and Diggs scored a ton of points together last year. Apparently, what I did not think about was the first 3 weeks of the schedule, where they placed the Steelers, the Dolphins, and then the Washington football team as their opposing defenses. We're 0-2, and we're going to have to figure out a way to turn it around. I think that there's a lot of talent. I do want to try to find a running back if anyone's listening. So send me your running back trades, and let's see what we can work out. If you want Travis Kelce for Christian McCaffrey, we can make that happen. So
hang on, who else do we have at we don't even have.
I don't know if I have a second.
There's not even a second tight end here. We got an open.
I will find one off waivers if you will give us Christian McCaffrey.
Oh man, like who is even on available right now at tight end here?
It is the 10-team league, so it's not.
Yeah, I mean, Jared Cook, Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, Zach Ertz.
Plenty of people available. Well, not Zach Ertz this week.
No, not quite. I'm just looking to see who's still available in the league. Yeah, he's good old
points there.
Good old COVID.
There's points there. So the other league I want to tell you guys about, I don't know that I've actually formally introduced it on this podcast yet. It's called Honey, I Shrunk the League, where the roster sizes get smaller and you have to cut one player from your team each week, and they are then not available to be picked up by anyone. So the commissioner has to keep this ongoing list, and apparently they will force drop people if you accidentally pick them up. The person who got force dropped from this league, because it has super huge rosters and it's basically quarterback and a whole bunch of flex, is I cut Donovan Peoples-Jones because he has been horrible. And I think this last week he got negative 1.1 fantasy points.
I hear that's good. What are you talking about?
I think the week before that he got 0.7. So through 2 games he was negative, and I was like, yeah, you're gone for good. I know that Jarvis Landry is now hurt. Odell Beckham's been out the first 2 weeks. I would assume if they come back, you're going to see less targets still. So goodbye, Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Later.
Of the Browns. You are no longer eligible to be picked up by any team. So unfortunately in that league, I was winning, and I went up against this person named Aaron Jones on Monday night and did not win. So I'm trying to represent the Brody well, and I'm failing somewhat tragically in some of these podcast leagues.
I mean, take a stab at a couple different, draft strategies, some conventional, some unconventional, see what works, see what doesn't. I mean, ultimately, if you're playing in a lot of leagues, you have a lot of options. You don't, like for me in the my dynasty league, because it's, it is a monetary payout. I did want to make sure that I was equipping myself with one of my tried and true dynasty strategies. Whereas with other leagues, I just kind of what? I like this guy. I think he's going to have a good year. Let me just pick him up. And it was more of a who I liked at the time versus really trying to do anything, unique. But let's, speaking of liking and disliking guys, let's talk about our studs and duds of week 2. There were a lot of performances I think people weren't expecting out of a couple of players, and definitely some high-quality performances out of players that we were expecting to do well. So Derek's his fantasy stud of week 2 was none other than the player we talked about on an earlier episode, Brandon Cooks out of the Texans. Actually, I need to pull up his stat line. Do you have it in front of you, or do you mean to grab it really quick?
I think it was 5 for 113 and a TD.
Not bad. For me, I look at the Texans, like wideout situation. Suddenly, Cooks is, he had a great week 2. Don't know how week 3 is going to go, but week 2 is definitely a standout performance. For me, mine, and I mentioned him a little bit earlier, was Sterling Shepard. So once again, I left him on my bench this past week in my dynasty league, but I did start him in, I believe, another league that I had. But in the dynasty league, he ended up getting 17.5 points. He had 1 carry. Technically, he lost 9 yards, but he was 9 catches on 10 targets, 94 yards. So this was the reason I had him as a stud, which, is just a decently, average performance. I think it's about what it means, right? And I kind of called this to a certain extent when we talked about the Giants Washington game and what I have been seeing out of this wide receiver core. And that Danny Dimes has really honed in on Shepard as his go-to and his safety net. We're seeing him spread the ball around a decent amount, but nobody else has, I think, tallied over 4 catches or 5 catches aside from Shepard. And, for a quarterback who sometimes has decision-making issues, having a go-to reliable guy is great. And I don't think that it's easy to double-team Shepard because, in reality, if you look at that wide receiver core, almost all of them are about at the same level. It's one of the reasons why they're one of the hardest, I think, wide receiver cores to look at from a fantasy standpoint, is because you never really know. Slayton's the fast guy, and he's going to get, probably some massive yardage and a touchdown, but he's not in a PPR league. He's not going to be the guy catching, 6, 7, 10 grabs. We don't want to really know anything about Golladay yet, as far as what his Giants career is going to look like. Tony has been a please, hopefully, for your sake, if you're listening to this, you didn't take a stab on him early in the draft, because that's bitten you in the butt. But I was very impressed with Shepard, and I continue to remain impressed with Shepard. I think actually in like a PPR, he's actually number 9 right now as far as wideouts go, which I don't think anybody predicted. And he's probably on the waivers for a lot of different leagues right now because people thought that week 1 was an aberration. Well, here he comes in week 2 playing against Washington, one of the better defenses in the league. And, he puts up even, more targets and more catches than he did in week 1, which was also, by the way, against one of the best defenses in the NFL. He's going up against one of the worst secondaries in the NFL this week. I'm just saying.
Nice.
Who was your stud of the week?
So I did end up having Aaron Jones in one league, and if you had anyone named Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, or Aaron Jones, you probably have them down as a stud this week because Derrick Henry was. Well, I went with Aaron Jones. He definitely sealed several victories for people on Monday night. So, in general, the stat line was 67 yards rushing and a touchdown, 48 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. So 6 catches, and in general, when you get 4 touchdowns, that's just nasty. So kudos to Aaron Jones. I have him as my fantasy stud of the week. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and just circle right around into our fantasy duds. And I don't want to spend a ton of time on mine, but we had talked about Corey Davis as an option to play. He had a fantastic week 1, and I think Bill Belichick overly focused on making sure he didn't do anything in week 2.
As he does.
2 catches on 5 targets and 8 yards. So half PPR league, he got 1.8. So that was pretty horrible. Uh, Sean, who was your fantasy dud of the week?
And this gives me great pleasure. My fantasy dud was Dak Prescott. So obviously, he had a monster of a week one against the Bucs, who were, considered to be one of the better defenses and better secondaries in the NFL. He's going up against the Chargers, and, you would expect, hey, this is probably going to be a high-flying game. The Chargers have a high-flying offense. So do the Cowboys. He's going to, load up those points again. Not so much. You saw kind of a shift, I think, in play calling. And they definitely try to run the ball a lot more. And so, 23 for 27, 237 yards, an interception. And just overall, like he had to fumble as well. And so, no touchdowns and then 2 turnovers. That doesn't do you much. In my Dynasty League scoring, he ended up with 6.48 points. That's not going to do it and this is especially if you have it like in a single quarterback league. That probably, his performance, I guarantee you, costs a lot of fantasy managers their matchups this week.
Oh yeah, I would agree. I know I had Dak in one league, and I think that may have been where I also had Aaron Jones. So I may have survived that one, but it was not easy to say the least.
No, Kittle is Derek's choice. And I get that. I don't know what his stat line was, but it's really hard to trust San Francisco 49ers offensive players right now. It doesn't matter who it is, because things just really aren't manifesting the way that you would hope. And some of that is just situational, but I think it may be too early to write them off completely, but it's looking a little scary. Let's talk about our surprises of the week.
I have the stat line for Kittle. If I can share that real fast.
Yeah, wasn't it like 2 catches or something? You cut yourself out for
4 catches for 17 yards.
4 catches, 17 yards. Yeah, that ain't good. That ain't gonna do much, especially when odds are if you drafted Kittle, then you drafted him at a much higher ADP than you would have otherwise potentially picked up some other key components. So you were expecting wide receiver-esque points out of that slot, and you're not getting, especially if you play in one of, I've never really talked about it, but, there are plenty of leagues that change their tight end scoring settings, to get them a little bit more involved, which, by the way, I hate. I'm not a super, crazy big fan of that, just because I think it skews the top 3, top 4 tight ends and drastically changes their ADP. But nevertheless, if you did pick up Kittle, odds are you were extra disappointed, because that could have been, a wide receiver that, could have made the difference in some of these leagues. But let's talk about our fantasy surprises. So for Derek, he had the Patriots defense. Well, quite a lot of interceptions. They made the Jets look atrocious across the board, really. So that is a pleasant surprise, I think, for a lot of Patriots defense holders. Who was your surprise of the week?
So I went with Mike Williams, and I feel like he's been pretty good altogether through a couple of games. This week he had 7 catches for 91 yards and a touchdown. And I feel like in general he's more utilized in the Chargers offense this year than we have really seen out of prior years. They kind of were using him more as a deep threat. But through 2 games, he's got 15 catches for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns, where he seems like he could conceivably be a regular starting wide receiver for your fantasy lineup. And before, he was kind of this boom or bust kind of guy. In the league I had him for half PPR, he got 18.6. And, I mean, that was more than players like Jamar Chase, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley. It was a really big steal to play him, because no one was drafting him, really. I got him really late in that draft.
Yeah. One of the things I want to call out about Mike Williams, especially, and this is going to be a little bit of a Cowboys hate. Anytime you are looking at potential wide receiver matchups, specifically against the Cowboys, they basically have one cornerback. They have one corner that's actually decent. So whoever that team's number 2 is, they're going to have a good week. They're going to have a big week. So just a word to the wise, keep an eye on that. If they're playing if you have a wide receiver who's normally wide out number 2, and they're sitting on your bench, but you see they're playing the Cowboys this week, potentially give them a shot. For me, mine was Rondale Moore, and out of the Arizona Cardinals. So he got his first touchdown this weekend. He ended up with 7 catches, 8 targets, 114 yards, and a touchdown. With the way Arizona's offense is playing, you have to look at him as a legitimate like flex option in some deeper leagues. As he develops, he may end up developing into a solid wide receiver too. It's just going to be a matter of time. So I was pleasantly surprised, especially after he had a rather average opening game against the Titans. This is he's going up against Jacksonville in week 3, and then he has a couple of reality checks here in week 4 and week 5. So I think that you have to, I wouldn't completely buy Rondale Moore. He's a smaller, faster guy. So, you're going to need to look at how he does against some of these better defenses, the Browns in week 6, before coming back to playing Houston and Green Bay, 2 weaker secondaries in week 7 and 8. So, just if you're in a dynasty league, grab him. He's probably already been picked up, but in some like redraft leagues or anything like that, this is a guy to keep an eye on. He probably isn't on a tremendous amount of starting lineups, but it's watch his development. Watch his development very, very carefully.
I think for Rondale Moore, I saw Roto-World was saying he was actually the person that they said to target the most to pick up for the last, after week 1 and now after week 2. They're saying, go get Rondale Moore. He's going to be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, number 20 right now in as a wideout, 47 overall, and this is I believe this is PPR scoring with what I'm looking at right now. So I'm high on the guy. Especially in that offense, man. Especially in an offense, it's hard to look at some of these cards, offensive standouts, and say that they don't have fantasy value. Let's go to the matchup questions. Let's so what's on the docket here that we fielded?
So we did get one from our friends over at the Makeshift Managers podcast, which is at TAMSM podcast on Twitter. And I actually had talked to them before the game, and they said that they were buying the Panthers upsetting the Saints. So kudos to them for calling that one, because I was not necessarily as aware of that surprise coming. But they're saying this week, you going with Scary Terry, despite, is he quarterback proof? He's got Taylor Heineke. Or are you going to stick with the purple and play Justin Jefferson in this weird dichotomy of roles that Kirk Cousins is kind of having? I think that they've said Jefferson is getting the targets, Dillon is getting the touchdowns, and Osborne is getting the yards on the team. And it's confusing, I think, to say the least, for the Minnesota receiving room. This week, let's see, the football team is taking on the Bills, which is not necessarily a desirable matchup on the road. Whereas the Vikings, let's see, who do the Vikings play this week?
Vikings are going up against that Seahawks defense that has not been as weren't as good in week 2 as they were.
Julio Jones looked good against them. But yeah, again, that's probably not who many people would say is their wide receiver 1. So,
I'll let you take. Sean. I'll let you take this one first, because I have. I want to hear your take on it.
I think that Terry might actually be more valuable with Taylor Heineke at quarterback than with Fitzpatrick there. I think the young quarterback needs to be able to have a receiver he can lean on. And sometimes that means, hey, we're going to do a slant. Well, if you're going to throw a slant, you're throwing it to McLaurin, and you're going to see if he can take it and go. If you're PPR, half PPR, McLaurin is going to feast. And I think that he has a higher floor right now than Justin Jefferson. And while the ceiling may not be there, I don't know that I trust that Kirk is going to fire it in to Justin Jefferson the way that I think Taylor Heineke is going to fire it in at Scary Terry. So I personally would go Terry over JJ this week, even though that's super weird because if you drafted Justin Jefferson, you're going to want to play him. So I hope you have additional flex spots somewhere. But I would play Terry.
So this to me is a coin flip, and I am leaning just an inch and a dime a little more toward Justin Jefferson. Now the reason for that is I feel like the Bills, generally speaking, they're going to be better defensively. Like they're better, I think, in the secondary right now, and they're coming off of a monster performance. There's a lot of momentum in their direction. And I think traveling to Buffalo is always rough. And especially considering that, the Bills are going to have, time to kind of prepare. And I don't know if I'm really super sold on any of the, Washington wideouts aside from Terry. Whereas I do think there is a bit of, and I actually like your call out here because I do think there is a bit of a bigger potential risk with Jefferson getting, either a lot of catches, but not a lot of, touchdowns, or, just them mixing it up generally. But the Titans are able to spread the ball around a decent amount, like quite a decent amount. And, the Seahawks are vulnerable to giving up big plays right now. And so if there's anybody in that offense that I think can capitalize and take a big play, it's going to be Justin Jefferson. It's also Dalvin Cook, but I think at the wideout position, Jefferson is the biggest individual threat. I think they're going to score similar points. I think they're going to score very, very similar points totals. I'm giving the edge to Jefferson, if only because I think that the Vikings are going to put up like a lot more passing yards, and it's going to be a much higher scoring game. And the ball is going to be thrown a bunch. Whereas with Washington and Buffalo, I have a feeling that's going to be a much lower scoring game. And in a PPR league, very well Scary Terry's probably going to get more grabs. That can make a difference. In a standard or half PPR, you have to then ask yourself, is he going to get the touchdowns? Is he going to get the yards? Like, what's going to happen there? So I think it's league dependent. And then really on, what, like you said, do you have a flex spot? Like, what are your options there? Do you think that there's potentially some outscoring possibilities, somewhere else that's a little more guaranteed? It's a tough choice. But I'm giving the slight edge to Jefferson. What's our so in our wonderful podcast league where we are 0-2? What's our dilemma this week? By the way, have you listened? I don't think in any of the suggestions I've made have my suggestions been taken.
I played Corey Davis last week at your suggestion.
Oh, okay.
He was my fantasy dud of the week. So
forgot about that.
I mean, we went up against Derrick Henry, so I don't know that it would have made that much of a difference.
It's fair.
So for this one, I'm really looking at the running back situation that I got ourselves in. And we've got Javonte Williams against the Jets. We've got Jamal Williams at home against Baltimore. And I put A.J. Dillon at San Francisco. Technically, we have Lindsey and we have Ingram. I don't know that I trust the Texans running backs against the Panthers. We kind of already talked about that matchup. I'm thinking I might do with the Jay Williams duo again, simply because I don't trust it, but I'm also going, oh my gosh, I have to trade for someone. Sean, where are you at as far as that's concerned? Would you even consider Dillon over those other guys? I know Dillon didn't play a ton on Monday night. But I also know that they can't just let Aaron Jones do everything every game.
These running backs suck. I'm looking at his like there is no positive spin. I think obviously Javonte Williams has to be one of the two. And I'm almost leaning toward either Ingram or Lindsey, to be quite honest. And I know you said, hey, we kind of talked about the running back situation with the Texans in our Thursday night preview, and technically, even if this is Fantasy Friday, but we are recording this on a Tuesday, and so we actually, the people who are listening to this live may actually know whether or not this was the right call. I actually am leaning toward Ingram, and it feels a little weird that I think he's going to be very, very touchdown dependent, and it's going to be a matter of does he get the touchdowns on the ground? Does Lindsey get the touchdowns on the ground? What ends up happening? What ends up being this situation? But I don't think Dylan's the right call. I even though let's see, what did he have? He only saw 19 snaps and he only saw the ball 3 times. No, just under sorry, not 3 times. 19 snaps and basically 5 carries and a catch.
Yeah.
That ain't much. And 49. I am leaning toward Ingram. And it's tough, right? This is an awful situation, and just the only reason that I am not really considering Williams. What? Let's see. They're going up against Baltimore.
They're at home.
I like Swift.
PPR,
so
you could say Jamal Williams, but it's not full PPR.
Yeah.
So I think I'll put Ingram in. We'll go Javonte and we'll go Ingram.
Yeah, I like Swift. I think Swift is so good, and he's doing so well in that offense. It's hard for me to say that Jamal Williams is going to get anything going consistently, and especially in a matchup like this. So I know he had a solid opener against San Francisco, but that was, I think, unexpected. And I feel like what we saw against Green Bay is definitely going to be more par for the course, I guess, in certain regards. So those are my thoughts. Let's go ahead and finish the episode out. Let's talk about our fantasy sleepers. Derek had the Broncos defense, which, to be quite honest, I think that if you're, if you're doing the rotating 2 defenses thing, you're probably leaning toward the Broncos anyway, anyhow. But we just saw Zach Wilson throw 4 interceptions against the Patriots defense. I'm sure if you're holding the Broncos defense and you're seeing the Broncos are playing at home, you're like, yeah, it'd be even better secondary, huh? Okay, yeah, let's start him. So I think that's a good call. What about you? What are you looking at for your sleeper?
So this week I'm looking at Justin Herbert, and I'm looking at him in part because I really haven't seen a lot on the Chiefs defense that I've really liked. Plus, let's say the Chiefs are able to go on one of those spurts that they do where somehow they score 24 points in the second quarter and it's 24-10 at the half. Herbert's going to have to pass more. Let's see if Herbert takes some additional chances in this offense. And I know he had a red zone turnover this week, but his receiver fell down in the end zone. How much of that is really his fault? I think that Herbert is going to provide value, and if you have him, that you took him potentially a little bit later, I think this is the type of matchup you have him for, because he's going to have to go out there, he's going to have to throw the ball, and he should get the touchdowns this week, even though he's only had 1 the first 2 weeks. I think it's going to be his best game of the year so far, and I don't think that that's saying much.
No, I can definitely agree to that. I told you I'm all in on Justin Herbert, so I think this is a pretty good option. I'm actually going with my boy Dallas Goddard. I think that we saw a definite dip in performance against San Francisco. 2 catches, 24 yards. That's not doing much. He had a pretty solid opener. 4 catches on 5 targets, 42 yards, and a touchdown. I think the big thing is the having the tight end safety net for the Eagles offense is huge. And we talked about it. I don't know if it was this episode or last. We talked about. Oh no, we talked about this episode because I said that Zach Ertz was on the waiver wire for the podcast league. Well, Zach Ertz has COVID. He's not going to be playing. So Dallas is probably going to get a lot more looks against Dallas. See what I did there? And I know that Ertz spreads the ball around a lot and really hasn't had, I think, a target that he's favorited over another. And a lot of these breakout plays that a lot of times get dumped off to a tight end in other offenses can sometimes result in, when you have a mobile quarterback, the quarterback just keeping it. But a lot of those, especially in the red zone, turn into touchdowns. So I think that Goddard's due for probably a 4, 5, 6 grab game, especially considering that this is likely going to be a more offensively geared game. And I think he's a high touchdown threat, especially over some of these wideouts. I would look for a bit of a bounce back for him. So that's what I'm thinking we end up seeing. Well, that's it. That Fantasy Sleepers are our last segment. Any final thoughts before we call it a Fantasy Friday?
I think that Fantasy Fridays are fantastic, and that's where you should go for all of your fun podcast needs.
Exactly. Well, as always, I want to thank you for listening. If you do have the option of liking or subscribing or commenting or reviewing or doing whatever it is that you can do to help us out on your chosen platform to listen to us, whether that be, on a like a podcasting network platform or YouTube, please do so. You can find all of our links on our Linktree, linktr.ee/BrodyTalk. We're most active on our Twitter as far as our social media presence goes. Caleb loves interacting with everybody, so if you have any questions, concerns, just want to be even a shout out, like it's throwing us in there, we're always happy to give you a shout out as long as it's productive, reasonable, and conducive to the episode that we're covering. We're always happy to maybe drop your Twitter handle. But on behalf of Caleb and our absent co-host Derek, my name is Sean. We are Brody Sports Talk. We are signing out. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.